I never thought I'd live to see 72 years old and still be capable of the kind of rage that makes your hands shake and your vision blur at the edges. But here I am, sitting in my kitchen in Portland, Oregon, watching the rain streak down the windows, and I can still feel that fury burning in my chest like I swallowed hot coals. My name is Barbara Whitmore, and what I'm about to tell you happened just 8 months ago. Every word of it is true. Every horrible, unbelievable moment. Before I go any further, I want you to do something for me. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching this from. Are you in your living room? Lying in bed? Sitting in your car during your lunch break? I want to know, because what happened to me, what my own daughter did, it could happen to anyone, anywhere. And if you stick with me through this story, if you let me take you through every painful twist and revelation, I promise you'll understand why some betrayals cut so deep they change the shape of your soul forever. Make sure you check the description box below. There are more stories like mine there, stories of people who survived the unthinkable and came out the other side. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember because Tuesdays were my volunteering days at the food bank, and I was just putting on my coat when my phone rang. The number was from Vancouver General Hospital, and my heart stopped before I even answered. You know that feeling, don't you? When you see a hospital number and you just no something terrible has happened. Mrs. Whitmore? This is Dr. Patel calling about your husband, Robert. He's been admitted to our emergency department. He suffered a severe stroke approximately 2 hours ago. The world tilted sideways. Robert. My Robert, who I'd been married to for 4 to 9 years. He'd gone up to Vancouver for a medical conference. He was a retired cardiologist, but he still loved attending these events, networking with old colleagues, staying sharp. He was supposed to come home in 3 days. Instead, he was lying in a hospital bed 200 miles away, his brain bleeding, his future uncertain. I need to get there, I said, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. I'm leaving right now. Mrs. Whitmore, I should prepare you. The stroke was significant. He's stable, but he's unconscious, and we're not sure when or if he'll wake up. That word hung in the air like a noose. I called our daughter Jenny immediately. She lived just 15 minutes away from us in a nice house in the West Hills with her son, my precious grandson Timothy. He was 8 years old, with Robert's blue eyes and my stubborn chin. Jenny had been raising him alone since his father, a man named Derek Patterson who I never liked, left when Timothy was just 2. She'd struggled, I won't lie about that. Money had been tight. Her job as a real estate agent had its ups and downs. But Robert and I had always been there for her, helping with Timothy, giving her money when she needed it, being the safety net every parent wants to be. Mom. Jenny's voice was groggy when she answered. It was 8:47 in the morning, and she sounded like she'd just woken up. Jenny, it's your father. He's had a stroke. He's in Vancouver General. I'm leaving right now to drive up there. There was a long pause. Too long. Is he going to be okay? I don't know, sweetheart. They don't know. I'll call you when I get there and no more. Can you watch the house while I'm gone? Water the plants, bring in the mail. Of course, Mom. Of course. Do you want me to come with you? I almost said yes. God, how I wish I had said yes. But I was thinking about Timothy, about how much he adored his grandfather, about how terrified he'd be to lose him. No, honey. Stay with Timothy. Keep things normal for him. I'll keep you updated every step of the way. Okay. Mom? Tell Dad I love him. I will, baby. I love you. I threw some clothes in a bag, grabbed my purse, and was on the road within 30 minutes. The drive to Vancouver usually took about 6 hours, but I made it in 5.5, pushing the speed limit, barely seeing the highway through my tears. I kept thinking about the last conversation I'd had with Robert before he left. We'd argued about something stupid, whether to repaint the guest bedroom or not. I'd been snippy with him, impatient. And now he might die never knowing that I didn't care about the damn paint color, that all I cared about was him, us, the life we'd built together. When I got to the hospital, a nurse led me to the ICU. Robert looked so small in that bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed, a tube down his throat, his face slack on one side. I pulled a chair up next to him, took his hand, his warm, familiar hand that had held mine through 4 decades of joy and pain, and I started talking to him. I told him about the drive, about the cherry blossoms starting to bloom along the highway, about how Timothy had a school play coming up and how proud he'd be to see his grandfather there. I told him I was sorry about being short with him. I told him I loved him more than my own life. The doctors were honest with me. The next 72 hours would be critical. Robert was 73 years old, and the stroke had been severe. There was brain swelling. There were complications. All we could do was wait and hope and pray. I barely left his bedside for the next 7 days. I slept in the chair next to him, ate cafeteria food that tasted like cardboard, and talked to him constantly. The nurses said hearing familiar voices might help, might reach him wherever he'd gone inside his damaged brain. So I talked until my throat was raw, reminiscing about our honeymoon in Hawaii, about the day Jenny was born, about the time we got lost hiking in the Cascades and ended up sleeping under the stars. Jenny called every day, sometimes twice a day. She asked about her father's condition, about whether there was any change, any sign of improvement. She sounded concerned, loving. She told me she was taking care of everything at home, that I shouldn't worry about anything except being there for Dad. She told me Timothy was asking about his grandpa every night before bed, praying for him to get better. On the 6th day, Robert's eyes fluttered open. Just for a moment, but it was enough. The doctors said it was a good sign, that his brain was trying to heal itself. He couldn't speak yet, the tube was still in, but when I leaned close and whispered, "I'm here, my love. I'm right here," I swear I felt his fingers squeeze mine. That night, I called Jenny with tears of relief streaming down my face. He opened his eyes, I told her. The doctors think he's going to make it. It'll be a long recovery, but he's going to make it. Oh, Mom. Oh, thank God. Jenny's voice cracked with emotion. When are you coming home? Tomorrow, I think. Or the day after. I want to make sure he's stable, that he can recognize me, that he's really going to be okay. But soon, baby. I'll be home soon. Good. That's good. We miss you. I miss you too, sweetheart. Tell Timothy Grandpa's going to be fine. Tell him we'll all be together again soon. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in a week. My husband was going to live. My family was waiting for me at home. Everything was going to be all right. I had no idea that while I'd been sitting at Robert's bedside, holding his hand and praying for his recovery, my daughter had done something so unspeakable, so monstrous, that I would never look at her the same way again. I had no idea that my grandson, my beautiful, innocent 8-year-old grandson, had been screaming for me in the darkness. On the 7th day after Robert's stroke, the doctors finally gave me permission to go home for a few days. Robert was stable, conscious, and improving. He still couldn't speak clearly because of the paralysis affecting the right side of his face, but he could squeeze my hand, and his eyes followed me around the room. The neurologist, Dr. Chen, a kind woman in her 40s who reminded me of my younger self, said that Robert would need weeks, maybe months, of rehabilitation, but that he'd probably regain most of his functions. Go home, she urged me. Get some rest, take a shower in your own bathroom, sleep in your own bed. We'll call you if anything changes, but honestly, Mrs. Whitmore, you need to take care of yourself too. You're no good to him if you collapse from exhaustion. She was right. I could barely remember the last time I'd slept more than 2 hours at a stretch. My back ached from sleeping in the chair, my clothes smelled like hospital antiseptic, and I could see how gaunt and grey my face looked in the reflection of Robert's four-stand. I needed to go home, recharge, gather some more of Robert's things for his rehabilitation stay. I kissed my husband goodbye around 9 a.m. on that Thursday morning. I'll be back in a few days, I promised him, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. I'm just going home to check on things, get you some proper pajamas and your reading glasses. Jenny and Timothy will want to drive up and see you next week, once you're feeling a bit stronger. Robert's eyes were clear and focused, even if his mouth couldn't form the words he wanted to say. I saw love there, and something else, maybe worry, but I brushed it off as his concern for me, for my exhaustion. How could I have known what was really waiting for me at home? The drive back to Portland felt different from the frantic drive up. I went slower, actually noticed my surroundings. The landscape was beautiful in early spring, everything green and alive, the trees heavy with new leaves, wildflowers dotting the roadsides. I stopped at a little cafe near Olympia for lunch, the first real meal I'd had in days, and the waitress, a young woman with kind eyes and a name tag that said Melissa, kept my coffee cup full and didn't rush me when I sat there for almost an hour, just staring out the window, processing everything that had happened. If you've ever had a moment where your whole life pivots on a single event, You know what I mean. 1 week ago, I'd been a woman worried about paint colors and what to make for dinner. Now I was a woman who'd nearly lost her husband, who'd spent 7 days watching him hover between life and death, who'd aged 10 years in as many days. Everything felt fragile now, precious. I found myself thinking about all the things I'd taken for granted, waking up next to Robert, his terrible jokes at breakfast, the way he hummed off-key while doing the crossword puzzle. I called Jenny from the cafe. "I'm about 2 hours from home," I told her. "Is everything okay there?" "Everything's fine, Mom." Her voice sounded strange, tight. "How was the drive?" "Good. Tiring, but good. I'm excited to see you and Timothy. Is he home from school yet?" "No, he's at a friend's house. For a playdate." Something about the way she said it made my stomach clench, but I pushed the feeling away. I was just tired, paranoid from stress. "That's nice. I've missed him so much." I brought him a little stuffed bear from the hospital gift shop. I know he's getting too old for stuffed animals, but I thought it might comfort him, knowing it came from Grandpa. "That's sweet, Mom. Drive safe, okay? I'll see you soon." I got back on the road, heading south toward home. The closer I got to Portland, the more excited I became. I wanted to stand in my own kitchen, brew coffee in my own coffee maker, sleep in my own bed with Robert's pillow next to mine. I wanted to hug my grandson until he squirmed away, laughing. I wanted to see Jenny's face, to share the relief that Robert was going to be okay, that we'd been given a second chance, more time. I pulled into our driveway around 4:30 in the afternoon. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, a modest but well-kept ranch-style home we'd bought 30 years ago, with white siding and blue shutters and a garden full of rhododendrons that were just starting to bloom. Jenny's car was parked in front, a Honda Civic that had seen better days. I grabbed my bag from the trunk and headed for the front door, fumbling with my keys. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Too quiet. "Jenny." I called out. "Honey, I'm home." No answer. I walked through the living room, noticing that things seemed slightly off. There were dishes in the sink. Jenny knew I hated dishes piling up. The throw pillows on the couch were scattered instead of arranged. Small things, but they nagged at me. "Jenny." I called again, louder this time. I walked down the hallway toward the bedrooms. Her old bedroom door was closed. I knocked. "Jenny, are you in there?" Still no answer. I tried the knob, locked from the inside. "Jenny." I pounded on the door now, worry replacing my annoyance. "Open the door." I heard rustling, then footsteps. The lock clicked and Jenny appeared, her hair messy, wearing sweatpants and one of my old t-shirts. She looked terrible, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, and she'd lost weight. She looked like I'd felt for the past week. "Mom," she said, and there was something in her voice I couldn't place. "Fear? Guilt? You're home early. I thought you said 5 or 6. I made good time. Honey, are you okay? You look exhausted." "I'm fine. Just didn't sleep well. How's Dad?" We stood there in the hallway, an awkward distance between us, and I remember thinking that something felt wrong. The air felt wrong. But I was so tired, so emotionally drained, that I couldn't process what my instincts were trying to tell me. "He's improving," I said. "Jenny, where's Timothy? I really want to see him." "He's at Kevin's house. Remember Kevin Hartley? From his class? They're working on a science project." Kevin Hartley. I knew the name, knew the family, but something about Jenny's explanation felt rehearsed, like she'd been practicing what to say. "When will he be home?" "Later. Maybe around 7. Kevin's mom is going to drop him off." 7. That was 2.5 hours away. I felt a wave of disappointment. "Okay. Well, I'm going to take a shower and maybe lie down for a bit. Do you want to stay for dinner? We could order pizza, make it a family night." "Sure, Mom. That sounds nice." But Jenny was already backing away from me, moving toward the front door. "I just need to run out for a bit. Get some things from the store. For Timothy." "I can go with you." "No." Her voice was too loud, too sharp. She saw my expression and softened immediately. "No, it's okay. You rest. You've been through so much. I'll be back soon." And just like that, she was gone, practically running out the front door, her car engine starting up before I'd even made it back to the living room. I stood there, confused, unnerved, trying to tell myself I was reading too much into everything. I decided to unpack my bag and do some laundry. I carried it to the basement door. We had a washer and dryer down there, and reached for the doorknob. It was locked. Not just locked, there was a heavy padlock on it, new and industrial looking, the kind you'd use on a storage unit. My hand froze on the lock. We never locked the basement. Never. There was nothing down there but laundry facilities, some old furniture, boxes of Christmas decorations, Robert's workshop. Why would Jenny lock the basement? I tugged on the padlock, but it held firm. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it, my heart starting to beat faster. And then I heard it. A sound from below. Faint, almost imperceptible. A thump. Then another. Hello. I called out, pressing my ear to the door. Is someone down there? Nothing. Just silence. But I knew I'd heard something. I was sure of it. I tried the lock again, pulling and twisting, but it was solid. I needed something to break it. I went to the garage and grabbed a crowbar from Robert's tool bench. My hands were shaking as I walked back to the basement door. That feeling in my gut, the one I'd been pushing down since I walked into the house, was screaming at me now. Something was very, very wrong. I wedged the crowbar between the lock and the door frame and pulled with all my strength. The first attempt did nothing. The second attempt made the screws groan. On the third try, the lock tore free with a screech of metal and wood, the door swinging open. The smell hit me first. Urine. Sweat. Sickness. And beneath it all, the musty odor of fear. Oh my God, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I flipped on the light switch and started down the stairs, each step feeling like it took an hour. The basement was dim, the single bulb casting long shadows. I could see the washer and dryer against one wall, boxes stacked against another. And there, in the corner, hunched against the cold concrete floor, a child. My grandson. Timothy. The scream that tore from my throat didn't sound human. It was a sound of pure animal terror and anguish, the kind of sound a mother makes when she sees her child in danger. Except this wasn't my child, this was my grandchild, my beautiful Timothy, and he was huddled in the corner of my basement like a wounded animal, filthy and trembling and so small. Timothy. I flew down the remaining stairs, nearly tripping in my haste. Timothy, baby, it's Grandma. He flinched away from me when I reached him, pressing himself harder against the wall. His eyes were huge in his pale face, and I could see he didn't recognize me at first, or maybe couldn't believe I was real. How long had he been hoping someone would find him? How many times had he called for help with no one answering? I fell to my knees in front of him, my hands shaking so badly I could barely reach out. Timothy, honey, it's me. It's Grandma Barbara. You're safe now. You're safe. Up close, the full horror of his condition crashed over me like a physical blow. His clothes, a t-shirt and shorts that I recognized from his spring wardrobe, were soaked with urine and stained with feces. His hair was matted with sweat and dirt. His lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration, his skin so pale it was almost translucent. There were dark circles under his eyes that no 8-year-old should ever have, and his arms were wrapped around his knees, which were scraped and bruised. But it was his eyes that broke me. My grandson's eyes, which used to sparkle with mischief and joy, were flat and empty. Traumatized. The eyes of someone who'd been to hell and wasn't sure he'd made it back. Grandma. His voice was a croak, barely above a whisper. Grandma, is it really you? Yes, baby. Yes, I'm here. I'm here now. I pulled him into my arms, and he collapsed against me, his thin body shaking with silent sobs. He was so light, too light. Had he lost weight? How long had he been down here without food? That's when I noticed the water bottles scattered around the corner. Cheap plastic bottles, the kind you get in bulk at the grocery store. Some were empty, some still had a few inches of water in them. And next to them, a box of granola bars. 3 left in the box. I felt vomit rise in my throat. Whoever put him down here had left him just enough to survive. Just barely enough. How long? I whispered into his dirty hair, rocking him like I used to when he was a baby. How long have you been down here, sweetheart? His answer was muffled against my shoulder. I don't know. A long time. Days and days. I tried to count, but I kept falling asleep and losing track. Grandma, I was so scared. I called and called for you, but you never came. Fresh tears poured down my face. While I'd been 200 miles away, sitting at my husband's bedside, my grandson had been locked in my own basement, calling for me. Abandoned. Terrified. Suffering. Who did this to you? I asked, even though I already knew. I needed to hear him say it. I needed the confirmation before the rage building inside me could find its target. Who locked you down here? Timothy pulled back to look at me, and the confusion in his eyes made my heart crack even further. Mom, he said simply. My mom. Jenny. She said she needed to go somewhere. She said you were gone and Grandpa was sick and she needed to deal with something important. She said I'd be safe down here, that it was just for a little while. When? My voice was steady, but inside I was screaming. When did she put you down here? After you left. The same day, I think. We were at your house. She said we needed to check on things for you. And then she brought me down here and said to stay quiet, that she'd be back soon. But she didn't come back. Not for so long. His voice broke. She came down once, I think. Maybe twice. She brought the water and the food. But she didn't stay. She just put them at the bottom of the stairs and left. I tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't listen. She just kept saying I'm sorry, I need more time. I felt something inside me snap. Something fundamental and irreversible. The daughter I'd raised, the woman I'd given life to and loved unconditionally for 34 years, had locked her own son, my grandson, in a basement for over a week. Left him in the dark. Left him to soil himself. Left him to wonder if anyone would ever find him. We need to get you out of here, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm for his sake. Can you walk, honey? I think so. My legs feel weird. Tingly. I helped him stand, and his legs buckled immediately. I caught him, feeling how fragile he was, how wrong this all was. Timothy had always been a sturdy kid, athletic and energetic. Now he could barely support his own weight. I've got you, I promised, sliding my arm around his waist. Let's get you upstairs. Slowly. One step at a time. It took us nearly 10 minutes to climb those stairs. Every few steps, Timothy had to stop and rest, leaning heavily against me. I could hear his breathing, shallow and labored. Dehydration. Possibly the beginning of organ damage. He needed a hospital. He needed doctors. He needed things I couldn't give him. But first, I needed to know the truth. All of it. When we finally made it to the main floor, I helped Timothy to the couch and covered him with a blanket. He was shivering despite the warmth of the house, his body going into shock now that the immediate danger was over. I brought him water, just small sips at first, because I knew too much too fast could make him sick, and a damp washcloth to clean his face. Timothy, I said gently, sitting next to him and holding his hand. I need you to tell me everything. Can you do that? Can you tell Grandma what happened? He nodded, his eyes welling up with fresh tears. Mom's been acting weird for a while. Since February, maybe? She kept getting phone calls she wouldn't answer around me. She'd go in her bedroom and talk in this low voice. And she was gone a lot. She'd drop me at after-school care and pick me up really late, like right before they closed. I thought back to February, trying to remember if Jenny had said anything unusual during our weekly dinners. But everything had seemed normal. She'd complained about work being slow, about needing to drum up more clients. She'd seemed stressed about money. But when wasn't she stressed about money? Did she say where she was going? Or who she was talking to? Timothy shook his head. No. But one time I heard her on the phone, and she was saying something about the deal and just a little more time. And she sounded desperate. Like when I really want something and I'm begging her for it. A cold dread was settling in my stomach. A deal. What kind of deal would make a mother lock her own child in a basement? The day she put me down there, Timothy continued, his voice getting smaller, she was crying. She kept saying she was sorry, that she didn't have a choice, that everything would be okay once she fixed this. She said you were with Grandpa and you'd be gone for days and days, and by the time you got back, everything would be fine and I'd understand. Understand what? I don't know. She wouldn't tell me. She just kept saying I had to trust her, that she was doing this for both of us, for our future. But Grandma. He looked at me with those traumatized eyes. I was so scared. It was so dark down there. I heard things, mice or rats or something. And I couldn't see anything except when she turned on the light that one time when she brought more water. I tried to escape, but the door was locked. I tried to break one of the little windows, but they're too high and I couldn't reach them even when I stacked boxes. I screamed and screamed, but no one heard me. Of course no one heard him. Our house sat on half an acre, with the nearest neighbors 50 yards away on either side. The basement was partially below ground, insulated. A child's screams wouldn't carry far enough to alert anyone. Jenny had chosen her prison well. She said something else, Timothy whispered. Right before she locked the door. She said, I need this. I need what they're offering. It's our only way out. I sat there, processing his words, trying to make sense of them. What could possibly be worth doing this to your own child? Money? Drugs? Was Jenny in some kind of trouble I didn't know about? Had she gotten involved with dangerous people? And then a worse thought occurred to me. Was this the first time? Timothy, I said carefully, has Mom ever left you alone before? For long periods? He hesitated, and I saw the conflict on his face, the child's natural instinct to protect his parent warring with the trauma of what she'd done. Sometimes, he finally admitted. Not like this, but, yeah. Sometimes she'd leave me at home and tell me not to answer the door or the phone. Once for a whole day and night. But she always came back and said she was sorry and brought me McDonald's or a new video game. My hands clenched into fists. All those times I'd asked Jenny if she needed help, if Timothy was okay, if she wanted me to watch him more, she'd always said no, everything was fine, she had it under control. I'd believed her because I wanted to believe her. Because she was my daughter and I trusted her. What a fool I'd been. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking with rage and adrenaline. I'm calling 911. You need to go to the hospital, honey. You need to be checked out by doctors. What about Mom? Timothy's voice was small. Is she going to jail? I looked at my grandson, this beautiful, innocent child who'd been betrayed by the one person who was supposed to protect him above all others, and I said, yes. Yes, she is. What she did to you, there's no excuse for it. No reason good enough. And she's going to pay for it. But even as I dialed the numbers, even as I heard the emergency operator answer, a part of me was already planning something else. Something beyond police and courts and justice systems that might be too lenient, might let her off with a slap on the wrist because she was a struggling single mother, because she'd cry and say she was sorry, because the system is always more forgiving to pretty white women with sad stories. No. Jenny was going to pay. Really pay. But first, I needed to know why. I needed to understand what could possibly drive a mother to do this to her child. And then I was going to make sure she regretted it for the rest of her life. The EMTs arrived within 12 minutes of my 911 call. They were professionals, a man in his 40s named Jeff and a younger woman named Amanda, and I watched them work on Timothy with practiced efficiency. They took his vitals, started and for fluids, wrapped him in thermal blankets, asked him gentle questions about pain and symptoms while carefully avoiding questions about how he ended up in that condition. That would come later, when the police arrived. We're taking him to Oregon Health and Science University, Jeff told me as they loaded Timothy onto a gurney. Their pediatric unit is the best in the city. Are you riding with us? Yes. Absolutely yes. I grabbed my purse and followed them to the ambulance, climbing in beside my grandson. He reached for my hand as they closed the doors, and I held it the entire ride, whispering reassurances I wasn't sure I believed myself. You're going to be okay. The doctors will take care of you. Grandma's not going anywhere. I've got you now. At the hospital, things moved quickly. Timothy was rushed into an examination room, surrounded by doctors and nurses who descended on him like a well-choreographed dance. I was ushered to a waiting area, a clipboard thrust into my hands with forms to fill out. Insurance information, medical history, and then, at the bottom, a question that made my pen hover over the paper: relationship to patient. Grandmother. Not parent. Because the parent had done this to him. A social worker appeared within the hour. Her name was Patricia Delgado, and she had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a gentle voice that probably helped traumatized children feel safe. But I wasn't a child, and I didn't need gentleness. I needed answers. I needed to know my grandson would be okay. Mrs. Whitmore, she said, sitting down next to me. I've been assigned to Timothy's case. I need to ask you some questions about what happened today. I told her everything. Finding the locked basement door. Breaking the padlock. Discovering Timothy. What he'd told me about his mother locking him down there. I watched Patricia's expression shift from professional neutrality to barely concealed horror as I spoke. And you said this happened while you were in Vancouver with your husband? For how long? 7 days. I left last Tuesday morning. I got home this afternoon around 4:30. Patricia wrote something on her notepad. And your daughter knew you would be gone? Yes. I called her from the hospital, told her about Robert's stroke. She said she'd watch the house. Did she give any indication that she was planning to leave Timothy unsupervised? No. None. She called me every day, asking about Robert. She never mentioned Timothy being anything but fine. She said he was at school, at friends' houses, normal things. My voice was rising, anger bleeding through. She lied to me. Every single day, she lied to me while my grandson was locked in my basement. Patricia nodded slowly. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to inform you that the police have been notified. They'll want to speak with you, and they'll want to speak with Timothy when the doctors clear him. Child Protective Services will also be involved. Given the severity of what happened, your daughter will likely be arrested when they locate her. Good. The word came out harsh, final. She should be arrested. What she did is monstrous. I understand you're angry. Angry. I laughed, and it sounded unhinged even to my own ears. Angry doesn't begin to cover it. My daughter locked her 8-year-old son in a basement for over a week. He was dehydrated, malnourished, covered in his own waste, terrified. She left him with just enough food and water to keep him alive. This wasn't an accident or a moment of poor judgment. This was deliberate. Calculated. Patricia's expression softened with something like pity. I can see this is devastating for you. Is there someone I can call? Someone who can be here with you? My husband is in a hospital in Vancouver recovering from a stroke. I don't. My voice broke. I don't have anyone else. Except I did have someone else. I had Jenny. My daughter, my only child, the baby I'd rocked and nursed and protected. And she'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of unspeakable cruelty. Where was she right now? Had she seen my car in the driveway and run? Did she know I'd found Timothy? Was she scared? Good. She should be scared. A doctor emerged from the examination room about an hour later. She was young, maybe in her early 30s, with her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her name tag read Dr. Rachel Brennan, Pediatrics. Mrs. Whitmore. She sat down across from me, her expression grave. Timothy is stable. We've got him on 4 fluids for the dehydration, and we're running a full panel of tests. Physically, he's going to recover. The dehydration was significant but not critical. He's young and resilient. We're keeping him overnight for observation, but barring any complications, he should be fine in a few days. And psychologically? I asked, because I knew that was the real question. Bodies heal. But minds? Souls? Those scars last forever. Dr. Brennan's face tightened. That's going to be the harder road. He's experienced significant trauma. We have a child psychologist on staff who's already spoken with him briefly. He's going to need therapy, probably for a long time. And honestly, Mrs. Whitmore, you might benefit from speaking with someone too. This kind of betrayal, especially from a family member, it takes a toll. I nodded numbly. Therapy. Yes. Later. Right now I needed to focus on Timothy, on making sure he was safe, that this could never happen to him again. Can I see him? Of course. He's been asking for you. Timothy was in a pediatric room decorated with colorful murals of sea creatures and cartoon characters that seemed grotesquely cheerful given the circumstances. He looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors and 4 lines, but his eyes lit up when I walked in. Grandma, he said, his voice still raspy but stronger than it had been. The doctor said I can have ice cream later. Any flavor I want. I sat in the chair next to his bed and took his hand, marveling at how this child, after everything he'd been through, could still think about ice cream. Children are resilient in ways adults forget to be. That's wonderful, honey. What flavor are you thinking? Chocolate. Or maybe cookie dough. Can you stay with me? I'm not going anywhere. I promise you, Timothy, I am never leaving you alone again. He studied my face for a long moment, and I saw something ancient and tired in his eyes, something that didn't belong in a child. Where's Mom? I don't know. But the police are looking for her. Is she in trouble? How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his mother is a monster? How do you tell him that the person who was supposed to love him most in the world cared more about something, money, drugs, whatever it was, than his safety? Yes, I said simply. What she did to you was very, very wrong. And people have to face consequences for wrong actions. Timothy's eyes filled with tears. But she's my mom. I don't want her to go to jail. Even though what she did was scary and bad. She's still my mom. That's the thing about children and abuse. They still love their abusers. They still hope for redemption, for things to go back to how they used to be. It's adults who understand that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. I know, sweetie. This is all very complicated. But right now, the most important thing is that you're safe and you're getting better. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. A knock on the door interrupted us. 2 police officers stood in the doorway, a man and a woman, both in their 30s, with serious expressions and notebooks in hand. Mrs. Whitmore? I'm Detective Ryan Foster, and this is Detective Lisa Moreno. We need to ask you and Timothy some questions about what happened today. I looked at Timothy, saw the fear flash across his face. Can he do this tomorrow? He's been through so much. We understand, Detective Moreno said gently. But the sooner we get his account, the better it is for the case. We'll be very gentle, and we have a specialist who's trained to interview children in these situations. You can stay with him the entire time if that makes him more comfortable. For the next hour, they asked Timothy questions. Where exactly had his mother kept him? What had she said to him? When had she brought food and water? Had she hurt him physically? Had anyone else been involved? Timothy answered as best he could, his voice getting quieter and quieter as he relived the nightmare. I held his hand and wanted to scream at the detectives to stop, to leave him alone, but I knew this was necessary. Every detail mattered. Every piece of information would help build the case against Jenny. When they finally left, promising to keep us updated, I sat with Timothy in the darkening room. The sun had set, and through the window I could see Portland's lights twinkling below us. Somewhere out there was my daughter. Somewhere out there was the woman I'd raised, who used to climb into my lap when she had nightmares, who'd brought me dandelions she thought were flowers, who'd cried in my arms when her first boyfriend broke her heart. Where had that girl gone? When had she turned into this? My phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't have a choice. Please understand. I'll explain everything when I can. Tell Timothy I love him. Tell him I'm sorry. I stared at the screen, rage boiling in my veins. She was sorry? She didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. She could have asked me for help. She could have asked Robert. She could have reached out to any number of social services. Instead, she'd locked her son in a basement. I texted back with shaking fingers. Where are you? The police are looking for you. Timothy is in the hospital because of you. Whatever you're involved in, whatever trouble you're in, you need to turn yourself in. 3 dots appeared, showing she was typing. Then they disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, a response came through. I can't. Not yet. I need to finish this first. I need to make the delivery and get the money. Then everything will be okay. Then I can fix everything. Delivery? Money? What the hell was she talking about? What delivery? Jenny, what have you done? I can't explain over text. They're watching. They're always watching. Just know that I did this for us. For Timothy's future. The money will change everything. And then, before I could respond, another message. I left something for you at the house. In my old bedroom, in the closet behind the box of my high school yearbooks. You need to see it. You need to understand why I had no choice. I looked at Timothy. He'd finally fallen asleep, exhausted from the ordeal and the medications they'd given him. A nurse had come in to check on him and told me she'd stay with him if I needed to step out. I need to go home for an hour, I told her. Get some things. Can you watch him? Make sure he's not alone. Of course. Take your time. I drove home through the dark streets of Portland, my mind racing. What had Jenny left for me? What could possibly explain or justify what she'd done? The house was exactly as I'd left it, lights still on, basement door still hanging open, that awful smell still lingering. I went straight to Jenny's old bedroom, the room that had stayed more or less frozen since she'd moved out at 24. Purple walls she'd painted in high school. Posters of bands she used to love. A twin bed with a faded comforter. I opened the closet and pushed aside old clothes and shoes until I found the box of yearbooks. Behind it, taped to the wall, was a manila envelope. My hands trembled as I pulled it down and opened it. Inside were documents. Bank statements. Letters. Photographs. And as I read through them, as I pieced together what my daughter had been involved in, I felt my blood turn to ice. Jenny wasn't just in trouble. She was in deep, dark, dangerous trouble with people who would kill her, kill all of us, without hesitation. And suddenly, her decision to hide Timothy made a horrifying kind of sense. I sat on the floor of Jenny's old bedroom, surrounded by documents spread out like pieces of a nightmare puzzle, and tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The overhead light cast harsh shadows across the pages, and I had to blink several times to focus because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Bank statements first. Jenny's checking account, going back 6 months. In November, her balance had been $247. By December, it had jumped to $23,000. Then dropped to $1,800 by January. Then another deposit in February, $31,000. And by March, when I'd left for Vancouver, she'd been down to $3,200. Large sums coming in. Large sums going right back out. The deposits came from wire transfers with cryptic reference numbers. The withdrawals were cash. Thousands and thousands of dollars in cash, pulled out in increments that stayed just under the $10,000 threshold that triggers automatic reporting to the IRS. Someone had taught Jenny how to move dirty money. Next, the letters. They weren't really letters, more like printed emails, and they'd been heavily redacted with black marker, presumably by Jenny herself to hide identifying information. But I could make out enough. Understand your hesitation, but the opportunity won't last forever. Our associates on the southern route have been very successful. You have the perfect cover, single mother, real estate agent, you travel for showings all the time. No one will question your movements. Next shipment arrives at the usual drop point on March 8th. You'll transport north as discussed. Payment on delivery, as always. Remember, discretion is everything. We've invested in you, Jennifer. Don't make us regret it. Disappointed that you want out. You signed on for 6 runs. You've done 3. We had an agreement. Think very carefully about breaking that agreement. Think about your son. Think about what happens to people who leave us hanging. The last letter was dated March 12th, the day after I'd left for Vancouver. I pressed my hand to my mouth, feeling bile rise in my throat. Drug trafficking. My daughter was transporting drugs. That's what the deliveries were. That's where the money came from. And she tried to quit, and they'd threatened her. Threatened Timothy. But there was more. Photographs, tucked at the bottom of the envelope. I almost didn't want to look, but I forced myself. The first was a surveillance photo of Timothy at school, sitting on the playground. Someone had drawn a red X over his face. The second was a photo of our house, my house, taken from across the street. Another red X. The third made my stomach drop. It was Jenny, coming out of a rundown motel on 82nd Avenue, a duffel bag in her hand. She looked terrified, glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone to jump her. And the final photograph was of a man. Late 30s, maybe 40, with a shaved head and a neck tattoo I couldn't quite make out in the grainy image. But what I could see clearly was the gun tucked into his waistband and the way he was staring directly at the camera with dead, cold eyes. On the back, in Jenny's handwriting, Vincent Russo. Enforcer. The one who gave me the photos of Timothy. Said if I didn't finish my contract, accidents happen to children all the time. I sat there, the photograph trembling in my hand, and suddenly everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. Jenny hadn't locked Timothy in the basement because she was cruel or because she'd stopped caring about him. She'd locked him there because she was terrified. She'd locked him there to hide him from Vincent Russo and whoever else was involved in this nightmare. She'd left him food and water not out of callousness but because she was trying to keep him safe while she completed whatever delivery she'd been forced to make. She'd been protecting him the only way she could think of. Which didn't make it right. Didn't make it anywhere near okay. Timothy had still suffered, still been traumatized, still been locked in the dark for days on end. But it meant Jenny wasn't the monster I'd thought she was. She was a desperate woman who'd made a catastrophically bad decision and then been trapped by even worse people. My phone rang, jarring me out of my thoughts. Unknown number. I answered it with a shaking hand. Hello. Barbara. Jenny's voice, cracking with emotion. Did you find it? Did you find the envelope? Yes. My voice came out flat, emotionless. Jenny, what have you done? What have you gotten yourself into? I was desperate, Mom. After Derek left, after child support stopped coming, after I lost 2 big sales in a row, I couldn't pay rent. I couldn't buy groceries. Timothy needed new shoes and I couldn't afford them. And then this woman approached me. She said she knew real estate agents who made extra money on the side. She made it sound so simple. So safe. Transporting drugs is never safe. I know that now. Jenny was crying, her words tumbling over each other. I know, okay? But at first it really did seem simple. Drive to Eugene, pick up a package, drive to Seattle, drop it off. $5,000 for 8 hours of work. And I told myself it was probably just marijuana, and that's legal in Oregon and Washington anyway, so what was the harm? The harm is it's illegal trafficking, Jenny. The harm is you got involved with criminals. The harm is, I stopped, taking a breath. Yelling at her wouldn't help. Tell me everything. From the beginning. For the next 20 minutes, Jenny laid it all out. The woman who'd recruited her was named Michelle Torres, and she worked for an organization that moved cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine up and down the West Coast. Jenny's job had been to pick up shipments in Eugene, where they came up from California, and transport them to Seattle and Vancouver for distribution. She'd done it 3 times between November and February. Each time she'd sworn it would be the last. Each time she'd spent the money on catching up on bills, buying Timothy things he needed, keeping their heads above water. But in February, she'd told them she wanted out. She was too scared, too guilty, couldn't live with what she was doing. That's when Vincent Russo had shown up at her house with the photographs. That's when he'd explained exactly what would happen to Timothy if she didn't complete her 6-run contract. That's when she'd realized she wasn't an independent contractor, she was owned. The last delivery was scheduled for March 15th, Jenny said, her voice hollow. Pick up in Eugene, drive to Vancouver. But then Dad had his stroke and you left, and I thought maybe I could use that. I could tell them there was a family emergency, that I needed to postpone. But they said no. They said the buyers in Vancouver were expecting the shipment, that delays cost money, that I'd already pushed them once before. So you locked Timothy in the basement. I didn't know what else to do. Jenny's voice rose to a wail. Vincent said they were watching me, watching him. If I brought Timothy with me, they'd know. If I left him with a babysitter or a friend, they might hurt them too. I thought if I hid him somewhere they couldn't find him, somewhere safe where he had food and water, I could make the delivery and be back in 2 days. Maybe 3. I'd unlock the door, bring him out, tell him it was a game or a mistake or something, and we'd be done. I'd have fulfilled my contract and Vincent would leave us alone. 2 or 3 days. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jenny, you locked him down there for over a week. What happened? She was sobbing now, barely coherent. Everything went wrong. The pickup in Eugene was delayed. They got suspicious that cops were watching the drop point. Then I had to wait in some motel for 2 days while they moved the shipment to a different location. Then the drive to Vancouver, there was an accident on I-5, traffic backed up for hours. Then the guy I was supposed to deliver to in Vancouver didn't show up on time. I kept texting you asking about Dad because I needed to know when you were coming home. I was terrified you'd get back before I did, that you'd find Timothy before I could explain, before I could. Before you could what? Make him lie for you. Silence on the other end of the line. Jenny, I said, my voice hard. Timothy is in the hospital. He's going to be okay physically, but emotionally, psychologically, he's going to carry this trauma for the rest of his life. The police are looking for you. Child Protective Services is involved. You're going to jail for child endangerment at minimum, and that's if they don't find out about the drug trafficking. I know. Her voice was small. I know I've destroyed everything. But Mom, you have to understand, I did it to protect him. If Vincent had found him, if they'd used him to force me to keep working for them forever. You should have come to me. I was shouting now, standing up, pacing Jenny's old bedroom. You should have called the police. You should have asked for help. The police? Mom, these people have cops on their payroll. Vincent told me they'd know if I talked to law enforcement, that they'd make it look like an accident. A gas leak. A car crash. A break-in gone wrong. And who would I go to? You and Dad? With your perfect lives and your perfect marriage and your retirement savings? What were you going to do, fight a drug cartel? She wasn't wrong about that last part. Robert and I were ordinary people. We had no idea how to deal with organized crime, no connections to anyone who could help. But still. We could have figured something out together, I said. As a family. Instead, you locked your son in a basement and traumatized him. I know. Jenny was crying again. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I need you to understand why. I need you to believe that I was trying to protect him, that I wasn't being cruel. Believing you had reasons doesn't change what you did. I know. God, I know. But Mom, I'm in even more trouble now. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? The delivery to Vancouver. Something went wrong. I got there and the buyer started asking questions. Why was I late? Was I followed? Did I tell anyone about the shipment? And I was so nervous, so exhausted from everything, and I think he could tell something was off. He took the package but he didn't pay me. Said Vincent would be in touch. So Vincent called me this morning. He said the buyer claims the shipment was short. That there should have been 5 kilos but there were only 4.5. He said I either stole from them or I lost it, and either way, I owe them $50,000. $50,000, Mom. I don't have that. I'll never have that. $50,000. Might as well be 50 million. What happens if you don't pay? Jenny's laugh was bitter and broken. What do you think happens? They're going to kill me. And then they're going to go after you and Dad and Timothy, because that's how they operate. They don't just kill the person who wronged them, they destroy their whole family as a message to everyone else. I sank back down to the floor, my legs giving out. This wasn't just about Jenny going to jail anymore. This was about survival. This was about men with guns and dead eyes coming for my grandson, for my husband recovering in a hospital bed, for me. Where are you now? I asked. I can't tell you. It's safer if you don't know. But Mom, I need you to do something for me. Absolutely not. Whatever you're about to ask. Please. Just listen. In my apartment, in my bedroom closet, there's a showbox on the top shelf. Inside is $15,000, cash I'd managed to hide from the last 3 runs, money I was saving to run away with Timothy if things got too bad. I need you to get it and wire it to an account I'll send you. It's a start on what I owe them. Maybe it'll buy me time to figure out the rest. Jenny, you need to turn yourself in. You need to go to the police, tell them everything, ask for protection. They won't protect me. Don't you get it? These people have resources. They have reach. The only way to keep Timothy safe is for me to handle this. To either pay them what I owe or... She stopped abruptly. Or what? Or disappear. Completely. Change my name, leave the state, start over somewhere they'll never find me. And abandon Timothy. Leave him to deal with the fact that his mother locked him in a basement and then vanished. He'll have you and Dad. He'll be better off without me. I've only ever brought him pain. For the first time in this entire nightmare, I felt something other than anger toward my daughter. I felt pity. She sounded defeated, broken, like someone who'd already given up. Listen to me, I said firmly. You're not disappearing. You're not running. We're going to fix this. Together. But you need to trust me. How? How can we possibly fix this? I looked down at the photographs spread across the floor. Vincent Russo with his gun and his dead eyes. The red X over Timothy's face. Jenny's terrified expression outside that motel. And something inside me, something primal and fierce and maybe a little bit insane, woke up. These people had threatened my family. They'd turned my daughter into a criminal and a child abuser. They'd put my grandson in a basement. They thought they could terrorize us and we'd just cower and comply. They were wrong. I don't know yet, I told Jenny. But I'm going to figure it out. And Jenny, when this is over, you're still going to face consequences for what you did to Timothy. But right now, the priority is keeping all of us alive. So you're going to do exactly what I tell you. Understand? Yes. Her voice was small, childlike. Yes, Mom. Good. Now tell me everything you know about Vincent Russo and the people he works for. Every detail, every name, every location. If I'm going to take them down, I need ammunition. I didn't sleep that night. After my conversation with Jenny, I drove back to the hospital and sat with Timothy until visiting hours ended at 10 p.m. He woke up a few times, disoriented and scared, and each time I soothed him back to sleep with soft words and gentle hands. Around midnight, a nurse gently but firmly told me I needed to go home and rest, that Timothy was stable and they'd call if anything changed. So I went home to my empty house that still smelled like fear and urine from the basement, and I sat at the kitchen table with a pot of coffee and the envelope Jenny had left me, and I started planning something that would have seemed impossible just 48 hours ago. I was going to destroy Vincent Russo and his organization. Now, I know what you're thinking. I could hear your voice in my head even then. Barbara, you're a 72-year-old retired schoolteacher. What do you know about taking down drug dealers? Call the police. Let the professionals handle it. But here's what I knew that you don't. The police are limited by laws and procedures and rules of evidence. They need warrants and probable cause. They need witnesses willing to testify. And as Jenny had said, these people had cops on their payroll. Any official investigation would leak back to them long before it could do any damage. What I needed wasn't a legal solution. What I needed was revenge. Personal, calculated, devastating revenge that would hit them where they were most vulnerable. I just had to figure out how. The information Jenny had given me over the phone was extensive. She'd been careful during her time working for them, keeping mental notes of everything: names, addresses, phone numbers, patterns. She'd thought maybe someday she'd need insurance, something to protect herself if things went bad. Well, things had gone bad. And now that insurance was mine to use. Vincent Russo lived in a house in Gresham, a working-class suburb east of Portland. He wasn't the top of the organization. That was a man named Marcus Delgado. I know I said to avoid that name earlier, but hear me out on how I'll handle this, who operated out of Seattle. But Vincent was the enforcer for the entire Oregon operation, which meant he was the one who collected money, delivered threats, and occasionally made people disappear when they became problems. He had two weaknesses, according to Jenny. He was predictable, and he was greedy. Predictable because he followed the same routine every week. Tuesday nights, he collected money from various street-level dealers around Portland. Thursday nights, he met with his boss at a restaurant in Beaverton to hand over the week's take. Saturday afternoons, he went to the gym, a place called Iron Temple on 82nd Avenue. Greedy because Vincent skimmed. He shorted the collections by small amounts, 500 here, 1,000 there, and pocketed the difference. He'd been doing it for months, maybe years, and apparently he thought he was clever enough that no one would notice. I sat there, drinking coffee that had gone cold, and an idea started to form. It was dangerous. It was probably stupid. It would require perfect timing and a lot of luck. But it might work. What if I could make Vincent's bosses think he'd stolen from them? What if I could frame him for exactly what he'd accused Jenny of, coming up short on a delivery? If you've ever felt powerless against someone who hurt your family, you know the intoxication of realizing you might have leverage. It's like a drug itself, that feeling of potential power. I felt it humming through my veins as I started sketching out a plan on a yellow legal pad. Step 1. Get proof of Vincent's skimming. Jenny said she'd seen him do it during one of their meetings, physically counting out money from a collection and pocketing some before putting the rest in the bag for his boss. If I could document that, photograph it, I'd have evidence of his theft. Step 2. Make sure that evidence got to the right people. Not the police, they'd ask too many questions about how I got it. But Marcus Delgado? He'd be very interested to know his enforcer was stealing from him. Step 3. Watch them tear each other apart while I got my family to safety. It was far from a complete plan. There were a million things that could go wrong. But it was a start. I spent the rest of the night researching Vincent Russo. Thanks to social media and public records, it's amazing how much you can learn about someone. He had a Facebook page, though it wasn't updated often, mostly pictures of his motorcycle and gym selfies. He had a girlfriend named Alexis Thompson who posted constantly about their relationship, including geotagged photos from their favorite restaurants and bars. He'd been arrested twice, once for assault in 2016, once for possession with intent to distribute in 2018, but both charges had been dismissed. Witnesses recanted. Evidence disappeared. Typical. By the time the sun came up, I had a notebook full of information and a plan that was maybe 30% thought through. I also had a raging headache and a growing sense of insanity. Was I really doing this? Was I really planning to surveil a violent criminal and attempt to manipulate a drug organization? My phone buzzed. A text from Jenny. Did you get the money from my apartment? Right. The $15,000 she'd mentioned. I'd completely forgotten about that in the chaos of planning. Not yet. We'll go today. Are you safe? For now. Staying with someone Vincent doesn't know about. But Mom, he's looking for me. I got a call from a friend who said he came by her place asking questions. He knows I haven't left Portland. Stay hidden. I'm working on something. What? What are you working on? I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. If I told Jenny what I was planning, she'd either think I'd lost my mind or she'd try to stop me. Maybe both. I'll explain later. Just trust me. I drove to Jenny's apartment around 8 in the morning. She lived in a complex off Powell Boulevard, one of those beige, boxy buildings where everyone minds their own business. Her unit was on the second floor. I used the spare key she'd given me years ago and let myself in. The apartment was a mess, dishes in the sink, laundry on the floor, mail piled on the counter. Evidence of a woman too overwhelmed by her life to maintain the basics. I felt a pang of guilt. Had I missed signs of her desperation? Had I been too caught up in my own comfortable life to notice my daughter was drowning? I found the showbox exactly where she'd said it would be. $15,000 in cash, mostly hundreds, bundled with rubber bands. I stared at it, this tangible evidence of Jenny's crimes, and tried not to think about what she'd done to earn it. I took the money and did something Jenny probably wasn't expecting. I didn't wire it to anyone. Instead, I kept it. Because if my plan worked, we were going to need resources. We were going to need to disappear, at least temporarily, while things shook out. And $15,000 was a good start on funding that disappearance. On my way out of Jenny's apartment, I passed a neighbor, an older woman with white hair and suspicious eyes. She looked at me, looked at the showbox under my arm, and I saw the calculation happening in her brain. I'm Jenny's mother, I said quickly. Just picking up some things for her. She's dealing with a family emergency. The woman nodded slowly. Haven't seen her around for a few days. Everything okay? It will be, I said, and I hoped I sounded more confident than I felt. Back in my car, I sat for a long moment, clutching the steering wheel. What was I doing? I was a grandmother. A retired teacher who spent her days volunteering at food banks and reading mystery novels and worrying about her husband's cholesterol. I wasn't a vigilante. I wasn't someone who took on drug dealers. Except I was. I had to be. Because the alternatives were unacceptable. My phone rang. Detective Moreno. Mrs. Whitmore, I wanted to update you on the investigation. We've issued a warrant for your daughter's arrest. Child endangerment, criminal neglect, and potentially other charges as the investigation continues. Do you have any information on her whereabouts? No, I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. I didn't know exactly where Jenny was, only that she was hiding. If she contacts you, you need to tell her to turn herself in. It'll go better for her if she comes in voluntarily rather than us having to track her down. I understand. How's Timothy doing? Better. The doctors say he can probably come home tomorrow or the day after. And Detective Moreno? What happens to him after this? After Jenny is arrested? There was a pause. That's up to Child Protective Services. But given that you're his grandmother and you're clearly able to care for him, I'd imagine they'd place him with you while things get sorted out. Unless there's some reason that wouldn't be appropriate. No reason, I said firmly. I want him with me. I'll do whatever I need to do to make that happen. Good. He's going to need stability right now. Familiar faces. After I hung up, I drove to a storage facility on the east side of Portland. I rented a small unit under a fake name, Clara Henderson, and paid cash for 6 months. I put the $15,000 in there, along with the envelope of documents Jenny had left me. Everything I might need if this went sideways, and I needed to grab Timothy and run. Then I went shopping. Not at my usual places, but at a pawn shop in a rough part of town. I bought a cheap digital camera with a telephoto lens, a pair of binoculars, a baseball cap and a pair of large sunglasses, a disguise so generic it was almost laughable, but it was something. The clerk, a bored-looking man in his 20s, barely glanced at me as he rang up my purchases. Just another old lady with too much time on her hands, probably planning to take up birdwatching or something. If only he knew. That afternoon, I visited Timothy in the hospital. He was sitting up in bed, coloring in a book that one of the nurses had brought him. He looked better, his color had returned, his eyes were clearer, his lips were no longer cracked. But there was still a wariness about him, a tension in his shoulders that broke my heart. "Grandma." He set down his crayons and reached for me. I hugged him carefully, mindful of the 4 still in his arm. "The doctor said I might get to go home tomorrow. Can I stay with you?" "Of course, baby. For as long as you need to. We'll set up the guest room for you, make it your room. We can paint it any color you want. Even blue. Even electric blue if that's what you want." He smiled, but it faded quickly. "Grandma, where's my mom?" I'd been dreading this question. How do you tell a child that his mother is on the run from both the police and criminals? That she might not be part of his life for a very long time, if ever? She's dealing with some things, honey. Some grown-up problems that got out of control. But she loves you very much. She wants you to know that. Is she coming back? I don't know, I said honestly. But Timothy, whatever happens, you're going to be okay. I promise you that. I'm going to make sure you're safe and loved and taken care of. He studied my face with those 2 old eyes. Are you mad at her? For locking me in the basement? Yes. What she did was very wrong, even if she thought she had good reasons. But Timothy, anger is complicated. You can be angry at someone and still love them. You can be furious with them and still hope they get better. I'm angry at her too, he whispered. But I miss her. Is that weird? No, sweetheart. That's not weird at all. That's completely normal. I stayed with him until evening, reading him stories and helping him with his coloring book and trying to pretend that everything was fine, that our lives weren't falling apart, that I wasn't planning something that could get us all killed. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I prayed. I'm not a particularly religious woman. Robert and I had attended church occasionally when Jenny was young, more for the community than the theology, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I prayed for wisdom, for courage, for protection for Timothy and Robert and even Jenny, despite everything she'd done. I prayed that my half-formed plan would work, that I wouldn't make things worse, that I wouldn't get us all killed. And then I prayed for forgiveness, because I knew what I was about to do wasn't righteous or noble. It was revenge, pure and simple. And whatever the outcome, I'd have to live with it. The next morning, I put on dark clothes, grabbed my new camera and binoculars, and drove to Gresham to watch Vincent Russo's house. Vincent Russo's house was a split-level ranch on a quiet street in Gresham, the kind of neighborhood where people mowed their lawns on Saturdays and waved to their neighbors and probably had no idea they were living next to an enforcer for a drug trafficking organization. The house itself was unremarkable: tan siding, brown trim, a 2-car garage with a motorcycle visible through the window. There was a basketball hoop in the driveway and a garden gnome by the front door that seemed absurdly cheerful given who lived there. I parked 3 houses down on the opposite side of the street, positioned so I had a clear view of his driveway but wouldn't be immediately obvious to anyone looking out his windows. I'd worn grey, a grey cardigan, grey pants, to blend in with the overcast Portland morning. The baseball cap and sunglasses completed my transformation from Barbara Whitmore, grandmother and retired teacher, to Barbara Whitmore, amateur spy. It felt ridiculous. It felt terrifying. It felt necessary. I'd brought a thermos of coffee and a book as props, so if anyone asked what I was doing sitting in my car, I could say I was waiting for a friend who lived nearby, or I was taking a break from errands, or any number of innocent-sounding excuses. The camera and binoculars were hidden in a canvas bag on the passenger seat, ready to be grabbed at a moment's notice. Now all I had to do was wait. If you've ever done surveillance, and I'm guessing most of you haven't, you know that it's 99% boredom and 1% panic. I sat there for 3 hours that first morning, watching Vincent's house, and nothing happened. No one came in or out. No curtains twitched. The only movement was a cat that wandered across his lawn around 10:30 and a mail carrier who dropped off a package at 11:15. My back started to ache. My coffee went cold. I had to pee desperately but didn't want to leave in case something happened while I was gone. I was starting to think this entire plan was insane, that I should just go to the police like a normal person and let them handle things through official channels. Then, at 12:47 p.m., the garage door opened. I grabbed my binoculars, my heart suddenly pounding. A black Dodge Charger backed out of the garage, Vincent's car, according to the DMV records I'd looked up. I couldn't see the driver clearly through the tinted windows, but it had to be him. The Charger pulled out of the driveway and headed east. I waited exactly 10 seconds, enough time that he wouldn't notice me pulling out right behind him, then started my car and followed. Following someone without being noticed is harder than it looks in movies. You have to stay far enough back that they don't see you, but close enough that you don't lose them. You have to anticipate their turns without being obvious about it. And you have to look natural, like you're just another driver going about your day, not a 72-year-old woman tailing a drug dealer. Vincent drove like an asshole, weaving between lanes, cutting people off, running yellow lights that turned red before he cleared the intersection. I struggled to keep up while also maintaining my cover. At one point I nearly rear-ended a minivan because I was so focused on not losing sight of the Charger. He led me to a strip mall on 122nd Avenue, one of those half-empty shopping centers with a dollar store, a check cashing place, and a cannabis dispensary. Vincent parked near the end of the lot, away from the other cars, and got out. I pulled into a spot near the dollar store, far enough away that I wouldn't be obvious but close enough that I could see him with the binoculars. He was exactly as he'd looked in the photo, shaved head, neck tattoo, muscular build. He wore a leather jacket despite the mild weather and had that particular swagger of men who think violence makes them important. He stood by his car for a minute, looking at his phone, then started walking toward the check cashing place. Except he didn't go inside. Instead, he walked around to the back of the building, into an alley I couldn't see from my position. Damn it. I needed to get closer. I grabbed my camera, climbed out of my car, and walked toward the strip mall like I had every right to be there. An old woman out shopping, nothing suspicious about that. I went into the dollar store, bought a pack of gum I didn't need, then walked back out and positioned myself near a dumpster that gave me a partial view of the alley. Vincent was meeting with someone. A younger man, maybe in his 20s, skinny with bad skin and nervous energy. They talked for a moment, then the young man handed Vincent a backpack. Vincent opened it, looked inside, nodded. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope, money, I assumed, and handed it over. This was it. This was a collection. This was Vincent gathering money from one of the street-level dealers to pass up to his boss. But I needed to see him skim. I needed proof that he was stealing. The exchange completed, the young man hurried away, practically running. Vincent stood there alone for a moment, looking around to make sure no one was watching. I pressed myself against the wall, praying he wouldn't notice me. Then he unzipped the backpack and started pulling out bundles of cash. I raised my camera, zooming in as much as I could. Through the telephoto lens, I watched Vincent count the money. He was methodical about it, flipping through each bundle. Then, and this is what I'd been waiting for, he took 2 bundles and stuffed them inside his jacket. Just like that. Quick and casual, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. I clicked the shutter. Once, twice, 3 times. The camera was on silent mode, so there was no telltale sound, but every click felt loud in my ears, like he'd hear it somehow and come after me. Vincent zipped up the backpack, glanced around one more time, then walked back toward his car. I hurried into the dollar store, pretending to browse the aisles while watching through the window. He got in the Charger and drove off. I stood there, trembling with adrenaline, my camera still clutched in my hand. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. I had photographic evidence of Vincent Russo stealing from his organization. Now I just needed more. One instance of skimming might not be enough to convince his boss. I needed a pattern. I needed to show that Vincent had been stealing consistently, that he couldn't be trusted. Over the next 4 days, I followed Vincent on 3 more collection runs. Each time was the same. He'd meet with someone in a discreet location, receive money or drugs or both, and then skim a portion before moving on to the next meeting. I photographed everything. I documented times, locations, amounts. I became intimately familiar with Vincent's routine, his patterns, his arrogance. I also became increasingly exhausted. I was splitting my time between surveillance, visiting Timothy in the hospital, fielding calls from Detective Moreno about Jenny's whereabouts, and checking on Robert in Vancouver via phone calls with his doctors. I was running on coffee and adrenaline and maybe 2 hours of sleep a night. My hands shook constantly. I'd lost 5 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. The bags under my eyes had bags. But I couldn't stop. Not when I was so close. On the 4th day, Thursday, Vincent drove to Beaverton for his weekly meeting with his boss. This was the big one, the meeting where he handed over the week's collections. Jenny had told me it always happened at a restaurant called the Red Door, a upscale place that served overpriced steaks and had private dining rooms perfect for discreet criminal meetings. I got there early and positioned myself in the parking lot across the street, in a spot that gave me a view of the restaurant's entrance. At 7:23 p.m., Vincent arrived in his Charger. At 7:31 p.m., a Mercedes SUV pulled up and a man got out who I recognized from my research, Marcus Delgado, the head of the Oregon operation. Marcus was in his late 40s, with graying hair and an expensive suit. He looked like a businessman, which I supposed he was, just one whose business happened to be destroying lives with drugs. He and Vincent greeted each other outside the restaurant, shook hands, then went inside together. I sat there in the dark, watching, waiting. They were in there for 93 minutes. I know because I counted every one of them, my anxiety building. What were they talking about? Was Vincent handing over the skimmed collections? Was Marcus already suspicious? Had I miscalculated everything? Finally, at 9:04 p.m., they emerged. They stood outside for a moment, talking, then shook hands again and parted ways. Vincent looked relaxed, almost happy. Marcus looked neutral. The meeting had apparently gone well. Which meant Marcus didn't know yet. Which meant my evidence could still change everything. I waited until both vehicles had left, then drove home in a daze. I had what I needed. Now I just had to figure out how to use it. Timothy came home from the hospital the next day. I'd spent the morning preparing his room, the guest bedroom that I transformed with new blue paint, done in record time with the help of a painting service, new sheets with dinosaurs on them, and shelves for his toys and books that I'd retrieved from Jenny's apartment. I wanted it to feel safe, welcoming, like a place where a traumatized child could begin to heal. When I picked him up, he clutched my hand the entire walk from the hospital room to my car. He kept looking around nervously, like he expected someone to jump out and grab him. "It's okay," I kept saying. "You're safe. I've got you." At home, he was hesitant to explore at first, staying close to me. But when I showed him his new room, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not quite happiness, but maybe the memory of what happiness felt like. "You did this for me?" he asked quietly. "Of course. This is your room now, for as long as you need it. You're home, Timothy." He walked around the room, touching things gently, the books, the toys, the soft comforter. Then he turned to me with tears in his eyes. "Grandma, am I ever going to see my mom again?" The question I'd been dreading. "I don't know, honey. Maybe someday. But right now, she has to deal with the consequences of her choices. And you get to be a kid. You get to feel safe and loved and never worry about being locked in a dark place again." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "Can I ask you something? Something about what happened?" "Of course." "Why did Mom do it? I keep trying to understand, but I can't. If she was trying to protect me like you said, why did it feel like she was punishing me?" I sat down on his new bed and patted the space next to me. He climbed up, and I put my arm around him. "Sometimes adults make terrible decisions when they're scared. Your mom got involved with some very bad people, and they threatened to hurt you if she didn't do what they wanted. So she hid you in the basement because she thought that would keep you safe while she tried to fix her mistakes. But what she didn't understand is that hiding you like that was its own kind of hurt. She was so focused on the danger outside that she didn't see the danger she was creating." "That's stupid," Timothy said bluntly. "Yes," I agreed. "It was. And now she has to live with what she did to you. That's going to haunt her for the rest of her life, Timothy. Whether she goes to jail or not, whether you ever see her again or not, she's going to carry the guilt of hurting you. That's her punishment, and it's one she gave herself." We sat there together in silence, and I wondered if I was doing the right thing. Keeping the truth about Vincent and Marcus from the police. Planning vigilante justice instead of letting the system work. preparing to potentially make things even more dangerous for all of us. But then I thought about the red X over Timothy's face in that photograph. I thought about Vincent's dead eyes and his casual violence. I thought about how the police hadn't been able to touch him despite 2 arrests, how people like him always seemed to slip through the cracks of the justice system. No. I was doing the right thing. Or at least, I was doing the necessary thing. That evening, after Timothy was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and began composing an anonymous letter. Not a typed document that could be traced, but a handwritten note in block letters that disguised my handwriting. I included printouts of the photos I'd taken, Vincent counting money, Vincent pocketing bundles, Vincent meeting with dealers. I made a list of dates and locations. I calculated, based on what Jenny had told me about typical collection amounts, that Vincent had stolen at least $30,000 over the past 3 months. At the bottom, I wrote, "Your enforcer is robbing you blind. Thought you should know. A concerned citizen." It was dramatic and probably amateurish, but it would get the point across. Marcus Delgado would see those photos and realize his trusted lieutenant was a thief. And men like Marcus didn't forgive betrayal. I printed 2 copies of everything. One would go to Marcus. The other I'd keep as insurance, in case I needed leverage later. The next step was delivery. I couldn't mail it, that would create a paper trail. I couldn't deliver it in person, too risky. So I did something that felt like it came straight out of a crime novel. I paid a homeless man $50 to drop the envelope off at the Red Door restaurant, with instructions to give it to the manager and say it was for Marcus Delgado, urgent and confidential. The man, his name was David, and he had kind eyes and a weathered face, looked at the envelope, looked at me, and said, "Lady, you sure you know what you're doing?" "No," I admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." "Fair enough. I'll make sure it gets there." He shuffled off with my envelope and my $50, and I stood there in the parking lot of the 7-Eleven where I'd found him, wondering if I'd just made a huge mistake. Too late now. The wheels were in motion. I drove home, checked on Timothy, and then did something I probably shouldn't have. I poured myself a large glass of wine and sat on my back porch in the dark, staring at the lights of Portland spread out below me. Somewhere out there, Jenny was hiding, terrified. Somewhere out there, Vincent was going about his criminal business, thinking he was untouchable. Somewhere out there, Marcus Delgado was about to receive a package that would shatter his trust in his enforcer. And in Vancouver, 200 miles north, my husband was slowly recovering from a stroke, completely unaware that his wife had become someone he wouldn't recognize. I thought about calling him, hearing his voice, confessing everything. But what would I say? "Hi honey, while you were unconscious, I found our grandson locked in our basement, discovered our daughter is a drug mule, and started a war with a criminal organization." No. Robert didn't need to know. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some burdens you carry alone. My phone buzzed. A text from Jenny, "Mom, Vincent came to another friend's house today. He's getting closer. I don't know how much longer I can hide." I texted back, "Stay hidden for 3 more days. I promise, everything is going to change." "What are you doing?" "Protecting our family. Trust me." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, "I do trust you. And Mom? I'm sorry. For all of it. I'm so sorry." I stared at her words, feeling the complicated tangle of love and rage and pity and disappointment that had become my relationship with my daughter. "I know," I typed back. "We'll get through this. Somehow." But even as I sent the message, I wasn't sure I believed it. Because the thing about starting a war, even one against people who deserve it, is that you can never be certain how it's going to end. Or who's going to survive it. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on Monday morning. My phone ringing in the darkness, jarring me from the first real sleep I'd had in days. I fumbled for it on my nightstand, my heart already racing because calls at that hour are never good news. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe to accept. "Hello. Barbara Whitmore." A man's voice, unfamiliar, with a faint accent I couldn't place. "Who is this?" "A friend of your daughter's. She asked me to call you. There's been a development." I sat up in bed, fully awake now. What kind of development? Is Jenny okay? "For now. But you need to know, Vincent Russo is dead. Shot twice in the head outside his gym approximately 4 hours ago. The police are calling it a professional hit." The room seemed to tilt. Dead. Vincent was dead. My plan had worked, maybe too well. How do you know this? Because the same people who killed Vincent are looking for Jennifer. They think she's involved somehow. They think she tipped someone off about Vincent's activities. She needs to run, Mrs. Whitmore. She needs to leave Portland tonight. Who are you? I demanded. How do I know you're really calling for Jenny? She said to tell you that she still has the scar on her knee from when she fell off her bike in 5th grade trying to impress a boy named Daniel Rodriguez. She said only you and her father know about that. My breath caught. It was true. Jenny had fallen trying to do a trick on her bike, trying to show off for a boy she had a crush on. She'd needed stitches, and would never told anyone the real reason she'd fallen because she was so embarrassed. Okay, I said. You're really calling for her. Where is she? Let me talk to her. She can't come to the phone right now. She's packing. But she wanted you to know she's leaving, that she'll contact you when it's safe, and that she loves you and Timothy. Wait, but the line was already dead. I sat there in the dark, my phone still pressed to my ear, trying to process what I'd just heard. Vincent was dead. My anonymous tip had reached Marcus Delgado, and Marcus had responded with swift, brutal efficiency. He'd executed his own enforcer for betraying him. And now they thought Jenny was involved. Of course they did, she'd worked for them, she'd disappeared right around the time Vincent got exposed, and they probably assumed she was the one who'd gathered the evidence. They didn't know it was me. They didn't know a grandmother with a camera had brought down their operation. I should have felt victorious. Vincent was dead, which meant he could never threaten my family again. Jenny was fleeing, which meant she'd be out of their reach. My plan had worked. So why did I feel like I was going to be sick? Because I'd killed someone. Not directly, not with my own hands, but I'd set the wheels in motion that led to Vincent Russo's death. I'd known what would happen when Marcus saw those photos. I'd counted on it. And now a man was dead, and even though he was a terrible person who'd threatened my grandson, he was still a human being with a life that had ended because of me. I got out of bed and went to check on Timothy. He was sleeping peacefully, curled up with the stuffed bear I'd brought him from the hospital. His face in sleep looked young and innocent, unmarked by the trauma he'd endured. This was who I'd done it for. This child. My grandson. Protecting him from Vincent Russo's threats had been worth it. Hadn't it? I went downstairs and turned on the TV, flipping to the local news station. Sure enough, there was a breaking news segment, gang-related murder in southeast Portland. Vincent Russo, 38, was found dead outside Iron Temple Gym on 82nd Avenue. Police are investigating but have few leads. Russo had known ties to drug trafficking and was suspected in several unsolved assault cases. They showed a photo of Vincent, his mugshot from one of his previous arrests. He looked angry in it, defiant. I stared at that face and tried to feel something other than numb relief. My phone rang again. Detective Moreno this time. Mrs. Whitmore, sorry to call so early. Have you heard from your daughter? No, I lied. Why? A person of interest in a case we're working was found dead earlier tonight. We have reason to believe your daughter may have information about him. If she contacts you, it's extremely important that you call me immediately, for her safety as much as anything else. Who was the person? I can't discuss details of an ongoing investigation. But Mrs. Whitmore, your daughter may be in danger. If you know where she is, please tell me. We can protect her. I thought about the man who'd called me, about his warning that Jenny needed to run. I don't know where she is, detective. But if I hear from her, I'll tell her to contact you. Another lie. I was getting good at them. After I hung up, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, watching the sky lighten with dawn. I'd started something I couldn't control anymore. Vincent's death would create a power vacuum. Other people would step up to take his place. The organization would investigate, looking for whoever had betrayed Vincent. And eventually, if they were smart enough, they might figure out it was me. What had I done? Timothy came downstairs around 7 a.m., rubbing sleep from his eyes. Grandma, why are you awake so early? Couldn't sleep, honey. Want some breakfast? I'll make pancakes. Can we put chocolate chips in them? Absolutely. We spent the morning in comfortable domesticity, making breakfast, doing a puzzle, watching cartoons. Timothy seemed lighter than he had been, like each day away from that basement was letting him remember how to be a child again. I cherished these moments, knowing they might be fleeting, knowing that at any moment everything could come crashing down. Around noon, my phone rang. Robert's doctor in Vancouver. Mrs. Whitmore, I wanted to give you an update. Robert's making remarkable progress. His speech is improving, his motor skills are responding well to physical therapy. We're thinking he could be discharged to a rehabilitation facility closer to your home within the next week or two. That's wonderful news, I said, and I meant it. Robert was getting better. He was going to come home. And I was going to have to figure out how to explain any of this to him. There is one thing, the doctor continued. Robert's been asking for you. He seems agitated when we tell him you're not here. I know you have circumstances at home, but if you could visit. I'll come up tomorrow, I decided suddenly. I need to see him anyway. Tell him I'm coming. After I hung up, I started making arrangements. I called Patricia Delgado, the social worker assigned to Timothy's case, and explained that I needed to visit my husband in Vancouver for a couple days. Could someone from CPS stay with Timothy, or could I bring him with me? Given everything he's been through, I think keeping his routine stable is important, Patricia said. I can arrange for a foster care provider to stay at your house with him. Just for 2 days while you're gone. I hated the idea of leaving Timothy with a stranger, but I needed to see Robert. I needed to look my husband in the eye and decide how much truth I could tell him. The news about Vincent's death spread quickly. By evening, it was the lead story on every local channel. Gang violence. Drug wars. The inevitable result of Portland's crime problem, according to the pundits. No one mentioned me. No one suspected that a grandmother in her 70s had orchestrated the whole thing. I should have felt safe. Instead, I felt exposed. That night, after Timothy was asleep, I got another call. Different unknown number. Mrs. Whitmore, my name is Marcus Delgado. My blood turned to ice. I don't know who that is. Yes, you do. And I know who you are. I know what you did. I couldn't speak. My hand was shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Vincent Russo worked for me, Marcus continued, his voice calm, almost pleasant. And someone sent me evidence that he was stealing from me. That evidence was very thorough, very detailed. The kind of detail that could only come from someone who'd been watching him for days. Following him. Photographing him. I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't insult my intelligence. I had my tech people analyze the photos. They were taken with a cheap digital camera, the kind an amateur would buy. And the angles, the locations, they suggest someone who was following Vincent but trying to stay hidden. Not a professional. A civilian. I sat down, my legs giving out. He knew. He knew it was me. At first I thought it might be Jennifer, Marcus said. But Jennifer isn't stupid enough to frame someone and then stick around Portland. She ran, which is what a guilty person does. But you're still here. Still going about your life. Taking care of your grandson. Which made me curious. What do you want? My voice came out as a whisper. I want to meet you. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., at Riverside Park. Come alone. Don't bring police, don't tell anyone. Just you and me, a conversation between civilized adults. And if I don't come? Then I'll assume you want to make this difficult. And Mrs. Whitmore, you really don't want to make this difficult. Not with that grandson of yours sleeping upstairs. The line went dead. I sat there, shaking, tears streaming down my face. He knew about Timothy. He knew where I lived. He could get to us anytime he wanted. I'd been so focused on taking down Vincent that I hadn't thought about what came next. I hadn't considered that the organization would investigate. That they'd be smart enough to figure it out. And now Marcus Delgado wanted to meet with me. A man who'd just had his own enforcer executed. A man who ran a drug trafficking organization. A man who had no reason to let me live. I had less than 24 hours to figure out how to survive a meeting with a killer. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario of what might happen at Riverside Park. Would Marcus kill me? Would he threaten Timothy to force me into doing something for him? Would he let me go, satisfied that Vincent's death had solved his problem? The most terrifying possibility was that I'd never make it out of that park at all. That I'd become another statistic, another unsolved murder, and Timothy would lose both his mother and his grandmother in the same week. But I couldn't not go. Marcus had made it clear he knew where I lived, knew about Timothy. If I ran, if I went to the police, he'd retaliate. Men like him always did. So I did what any grandmother facing a meeting with a drug lord would do. I made a plan. First, I wrote letters. One to Robert, explaining everything, Jenny's involvement with the trafficking organization, what she'd done to Timothy, what I'd done to Vincent, and why. I told him I loved him, that our life together had been the greatest gift, and that if something happened to me, he needed to make sure Timothy was taken care of. The second letter was to Timothy himself, though I knew he was too young to read it right now. I'd date it for his 18th birthday. In it, I explained his mother's choices, my choices, and I told him that none of it was his fault. That he deserved all the happiness in the world, that his grandfather and I loved him more than life itself. The third letter went to Patricia Delgado at CPS. In it, I requested that if anything happened to me, Timothy should be placed permanently with Robert. I outlined our financial situation, our stable home, Robert's good health, everything that would make the case for keeping Timothy in the family. I sealed all 3 letters and put them in my safety deposit box at the bank early that morning, along with the second set of photos I'd taken of Vincent. Insurance, just in case. Then I arranged for the CPS foster care provider to come stay with Timothy. Her name was Susan Carter, a kind-looking woman in her 50s who specialized in trauma cases. She arrived at noon with a warm smile and a bag full of board games. "He'll be fine," she assured me when she saw my hesitation. "You take care of your husband. We'll hold down the fort here." Timothy hugged me tightly before I left. "When are you coming back, Grandma?" "Tomorrow afternoon, honey. That's a promise." I prayed it wasn't a lie. I drove to Vancouver and spent the afternoon with Robert. He looked better, his color had returned, his eyes were bright, and when I walked into his room, he smiled at me. That lopsided smile, because half his face still didn't work quite right, but a smile nonetheless. "Barb," he said, his speech slurred but understandable. "Missed you." "I missed you too, my love." I sat beside him and took his hand, and for a few hours I let myself pretend everything was normal. We talked about his therapy, about the doctor's predictions for his recovery, about the terrible hospital food and the nurse who snored when she napped at the desk. I didn't tell him about Timothy. Didn't tell him about Jenny or Vincent or Marcus or any of it. He was getting better, and I couldn't burden him with this nightmare. Not yet. Maybe not ever, if things went very wrong tonight. "Something's bothering you," Robert said after a while. Even with brain damage, even barely able to speak, he could read me like a book after 49 years of marriage. "Just worried about you," I said. "About getting you home, about your recovery." He squeezed my hand. "I'll be fine. You take care of yourself. Promise me." "I promise," I lied. I left the hospital at 6 p.m. and drove back to Portland. Riverside Park was on the west side of the city, a popular spot during the day but mostly empty after dark. It had walking trails, picnic areas, and a view of the Willamette River. It was also isolated enough that a conversation between 2 people wouldn't be overheard, and a body might not be found until morning. I arrived early, 7:30 p.m., and parked in the main lot. There were a few other cars, probably belonging to joggers or people walking their dogs. I sat in my car, watching the sun set over the river, and tried to calm my racing heart. If you've never faced the possibility of your own death, let me tell you what it feels like. It's not dramatic or noble. It's just sad. Sad to think of all the things you'll never see. Timothy growing up, Robert recovering, grandchildren you might have had someday. Sad to think your life might end in violence, in a park, killed by a man whose business you disrupted. But beneath the sadness was anger. Anger that people like Marcus Delgado existed, that they could threaten families and corrupt vulnerable people like Jenny and get away with it year after year. Anger that the system had failed to stop them, that I'd had to take matters into my own hands, and now I was going to pay for it. At 7:55 p.m., a Mercedes SUV pulled into the lot. Marcus Delgado's vehicle. I recognized it from my surveillance. It parked 3 spaces away from me. This was it. I got out of my car, my legs shaky but functional. Marcus emerged from his SUV, and up close he looked even more businesslike than in my previous glimpses. Expensive suit, carefully groomed hair, calm expression. He could have been a lawyer or a banker. No one would guess he trafficked drugs and ordered executions. Mrs. Whitmore, he said pleasantly, like we were meeting for coffee. Thank you for coming. Shall we walk? He gestured toward one of the trails. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and we started walking side by side. To anyone watching, we looked like two people enjoying an evening stroll. I have to admit, Marcus said after a moment, when I realized it was you who'd exposed Vincent, I was surprised. I did my research, retired teacher, married nearly 50 years, active in your community. Not the profile of someone who gets involved in my world. Your world destroyed my family, I said, finding my voice. My daughter. My grandson. You don't get to act surprised when someone fights back. Fair enough. Though I would argue that Jennifer destroyed her own family by choosing to work for us, and by her questionable decision regarding her son. She was desperate. You people prey on desperation. Marcus smiled slightly. Perhaps. But desperation doesn't excuse locking a child in a basement. That was all Jennifer. I couldn't argue with that. Why am I here, Mr. Delgado? Are you going to kill me? Kill you? He laughed, genuinely amused. Mrs. Whitmore, if I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. I didn't bring you here to threaten you. I brought you here to thank you. I stopped walking, staring at him. Thank me. Vincent Russo was stealing from me. For months, possibly years. The amounts were small enough that I didn't notice at first, but they added up. $30,000, by my calculation. $30,000 of my money that he pocketed while pretending to be loyal. That kind of betrayal. I can't allow it to stand. It sends the wrong message to my other employees. So you had him killed. So I had him removed, Marcus corrected. And I have you to thank for bringing his theft to my attention. Without your surveillance, without those photographs, he might have continued stealing for years. I didn't do it to help you. I did it to protect my family from him. I know. But the effect is the same. Vincent was a problem, and now he's not. That benefits both of us. We'd reached a bench overlooking the river. Marcus sat down and gestured for me to join him. I did, warily, ready to run if necessary. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said. You're going to go home to your grandson and your husband and your normal life. You're going to forget you ever heard my name. You're going to make sure Jennifer never comes back to Portland. She burned her bridges here, and I can't guarantee her safety if she returns. And in exchange, I'm going to forget that you exist. You'll never hear from me or anyone in my organization again. I studied his face, looking for the trap. Why would you just let this go? Because you're not a threat to me, Mrs. Whitmore. You're a grandmother who got caught up in something ugly and responded the only way you knew how. I respect that, actually. Family loyalty is something I understand. And honestly, you did me a favor. Vincent needed to go, and you gave me the evidence to justify it. As far as my people are concerned, I discovered his theft through my own investigation. Your involvement stays between us. And Jennifer will need to lay low for a while. There are people in my organization who think she was the one who exposed Vincent, and they're not as forgiving as I am. Give her 6 months, maybe a year, and they'll move on to other concerns. But she can never work for us again. Make sure she understands that. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think this nightmare was really over, that I could go home and raise Timothy in peace. But something didn't feel right. What do you get out of this? I asked. There has to be something you want. Marcus smiled, and for the first time I saw calculation behind his pleasant expression. I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that I could have killed you, could have gone after your grandson, could have made your entire family disappear. But I chose mercy instead. I chose to let you live. Because someday you might need something from me. Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm just a businessman who understands that unnecessary violence is bad for business. Either way, Mrs. Whitmore, you're free to go. Enjoy your life. Take care of that boy. And if you're smart, you'll never think about any of this again. He stood up and extended his hand. I stared at it for a long moment, this hand that had ordered deaths, that had built an empire on human suffering. Then I shook it, because what choice did I have? Goodbye, Mrs. Whitmore. I genuinely hope we never meet again. He walked back toward his SUV, leaving me sitting on the bench, shaking with relief and delayed terror and confusion. He was letting me go. He was really letting me go. But his words echoed in my mind, "I want you to remember that I could have killed you." It wasn't mercy. It was control. He wanted me to know that he held my life in his hands, that he could reach out and snuff it out anytime he chose. He wanted me living with that knowledge, that fear. And worst of all, it had worked. Because as I drove home that night, as I checked on Timothy and thanked Susan for watching him, as I crawled into bed exhausted and wrung out, I knew I'd never feel completely safe again. Marcus Delgado had let me live. But he'd taken something from me anyway. He'd taken my peace. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of normalcy. Timothy started therapy with a child psychologist named Dr. Helen Ostroff, who specialized in trauma. He had nightmares sometimes, waking up screaming that he was back in the basement, but they got less frequent as the days went on. He started drawing again, which Dr. Ostroff said was a good sign. His pictures were dark at first, all blacks and grays, but gradually color started creeping back in. I enrolled him in a new school, closer to my house, and watched him slowly make friends. He was hesitant at first, clingy, but other kids have a way of drawing each other out. By the end of the first month, he came home chattering about a girl named Emma who was good at soccer and a boy named Kyle who collected Pokémon cards. Robert came home in mid-April, transferred to a rehabilitation facility in Portland where he continued his physical and speech therapy. I visited him every day, and one afternoon I brought Timothy with me. Robert's face lit up when he saw his grandson, and Timothy climbed carefully onto the bed and hugged him, gentle with his grandfather's fragile body. "Missed you, Grandpa," Timothy whispered. "Missed you too, buddy," Robert managed, his speech still slow but improving. I stood in the doorway, watching them together, and felt tears roll down my cheeks. My husband was alive. My grandson was healing. We'd survived. Jenny called in May, from a number with a Montana area code. "Mom? It's me. Where are you?" "Billings. I got a job at a call center, nothing glamorous, but it's legal and it pays the rent. I'm using a different name, Rebecca Sullivan. I dyed my hair, got new glasses. No one here knows anything about Portland or about what I did. The police are still looking for you. There's a warrant." "I know. But Mom, I can't come back. If I come back, I'll go to jail for what I did to Timothy. And even if I don't, Marcus's people might still be looking for me. I'm safer here. I'm trying to start over." "You need to face what you did, Jenny. You need to make this right with Timothy." "How? How do I make this right?" Her voice broke. "I locked my son in a basement. I traumatized him in ways that might never heal. There's no making that right, Mom. The best thing I can do for him is stay away." I wanted to argue, but part of me wondered if she was correct. Timothy was doing better without his mother around. He was starting to trust again, to feel safe. Would Jenny's presence undo that progress? "He asks about you," I said instead. "Not every day, but sometimes. He wants to know if you're okay." Jenny sobbed on the other end of the line. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I love him. Tell him that leaving is the hardest thing I've ever done, but I'm doing it for him. So he can have a good life without me messing it up." "You could have a good life too, Jenny. If you came back, faced the consequences, did your time." "Mom, I can't. I just can't. I'm too broken. Too ashamed. Let me go. Please." We talked for another 20 minutes, and by the end I understood that Jenny wasn't coming back. She'd made her choice. She'd chosen to run, to start over, to leave her son behind. It was cowardly. It was maybe even the right thing. I couldn't tell anymore. After we hung up, I went to Timothy's room. He was doing homework, tongue stuck out in concentration the way he always did when he was thinking hard. "That was your mom on the phone," I said. He looked up, his expression guarded. "Is she coming back?" "No, honey. She's not. She's somewhere safe, and she's okay, but she's not coming back to Portland." Timothy absorbed this, his face unreadable. Then he said, "Good. I don't want to see her. You might feel differently someday. Maybe. But right now, I like it here. With you and Grandpa. I feel safe." "You are safe. I promise you that." And I meant it. Because even though Marcus Delgado was still out there, even though his organization continued operating, even though I'd never be completely free of the fear he'd instilled in me, I would do anything to keep Timothy safe. I'd already proven that. It's been 14 months since I found Timothy in my basement. 14 months since my life became something I barely recognize. A before and after divided by that moment when I broke open that padlock and saw my grandson huddled in the darkness. Robert is back home now, living with me full-time. His recovery has been remarkable. He walks with a cane, and his speech is about 80% of what it used to be, but he's here. He's alive. We've had to modify the house a bit, adding grab bars in the bathroom and a ramp for the front steps, but these are small prices to pay for having him back. He knows most of what happened. I couldn't keep it from him. The news coverage of Jenny's child endangerment charges, the fact that she disappeared and was wanted by police, Timothy living with us permanently. What I didn't tell him was my role in Vincent Russo's death, or my meeting with Marcus Delgado. Some secrets are too heavy to share, even with your husband. Timothy is 10 now. He's grown 2 inches and gained weight, filling out in the healthy way children should. He still sees Dr. Ostroff once a week, and probably will for a long time, but he's doing well. He makes good grades, has friends, plays on a soccer team. He still has nightmares occasionally, and he's claustrophobic. Elevators, crowded rooms, anything that makes him feel trapped sends him into panic. But he's learning to manage it. He's learning that he survived something terrible and he's stronger for it. He calls me grandma, but in every way that matters, I'm his mother now. I'm the one who makes his breakfast and helps with his homework and attends his parent-teacher conferences. I'm the one he comes to when he's scared or hurt or confused. And I'm the one who loves him more than my own life. We don't talk about Jenny much. She calls every few months from different numbers, different states. She's been in Montana, then Idaho, now apparently somewhere in Wyoming. She always asks about Timothy, always says she loves him, always cries. But she never asks to speak to him directly, and I don't offer. Timothy says he doesn't want to talk to her, and I respect that. Maybe someday he'll change his mind. Maybe someday he'll want answers, want closure, want something from the mother who abandoned him. But that's his decision to make, not mine. The legal situation is complicated. Jenny's wanted for child endangerment and criminal neglect. There's a warrant out for her arrest. But she's using a fake name, paying for everything in cash, staying off the grid. Unless she does something to attract police attention wherever she is, she'll probably never be caught. Part of me is relieved. She's my daughter, and I don't want her in prison. Part of me thinks she deserves exactly that for what she did to Timothy. I've learned to live with that contradiction. As for Marcus Delgado and his organization, well, they're still operating. I see news reports sometimes about drug busts, about arrests of low-level dealers. The war on drugs continues its pointless cycle. But Marcus himself stays insulated, protected by layers of people willing to take the fall for him. Vincent Russo's murder remains officially unsolved, though I know better. That case will never be closed because the people who could solve it don't want to. I've kept the photos I took, the evidence of Vincent's theft. They're in my safety deposit box, insurance in case Marcus ever comes back on our deal. I don't think he will. He got what he wanted, the removal of a disloyal employee. But it's good to have leverage, just in case. I've changed too, in ways I'm still processing. I killed a man. Not directly, but close enough. I manipulated a criminal organization into executing one of its own members. I did it to protect my family, but does that make it right? I don't know. I lie awake some nights, seeing Vincent's face, wondering if there was another way. A better way. But then I look at Timothy, safe and happy and healing, and I think, maybe not. Maybe sometimes you have to do terrible things to protect the people you love. Maybe that's what family means, being willing to carry the weight of impossible choices so your children don't have to. This morning, Timothy and I made pancakes together. He's gotten good at flipping them. He only burnt 2 out of the whole batch. Robert sat at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper and offering color commentary on our cooking technique. We laughed. We teased each other. We were a family, broken and rebuilt, different from what we were but whole nonetheless. Grandma, Timothy said as we were cleaning up, can I ask you something? Of course, honey. Do you think Mom will ever come back? It was the first time he'd asked in months. I dried my hands and sat down at the table, patting the chair next to me. He climbed up, and I took his hand. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday, when enough time has passed, when she's dealt with her own problems. But Timothy, whether she comes back or not, you're going to be okay. You have me and Grandpa, you have your friends, you have your therapist. You have people who love you and will never let anything bad happen to you again. I know. He squeezed my hand. I just wondered sometimes if she thinks about me. She does, baby. She thinks about you all the time. She calls me and asks about you and cries because she misses you so much. But she knows she hurt you, and she's trying to figure out how to live with that. Adults sometimes need time to figure things out, just like kids do. Will I ever stop being mad at her? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe you'll always be a little bit mad, and that's okay too. You get to feel however you feel about what she did. No one can tell you how to feel. Timothy nodded slowly, processing this. Then he said, I'm glad I have you, Grandma. Even though bad stuff happened, I'm glad I ended up here. My eyes filled with tears, but I smiled. I'm glad too, sweetheart. I'm glad too. That afternoon, while Timothy was at soccer practice and Robert was napping, I drove to a cemetery on the east side of Portland. I'd been there once before, a few months ago, and I'd promised myself I wouldn't go back. But I couldn't help it. Vincent Russo's grave was in the back corner, a simple headstone with his name and dates. No flowery epitaph, no beloved son or devoted friend. Just facts carved in granite. I stood there for a long time, looking at that stone, trying to reconcile the man who'd threatened my grandson with the man who was now just bones in the ground. I'm not sorry, I said aloud. I'm not sorry you're dead. You were going to hurt my family, and I stopped you the only way I knew how. Maybe that makes me a bad person. Maybe I'll go to hell for it. But I'd do it again in a heartbeat if it meant keeping Timothy safe. A breeze rustled through the trees, and I imagined it was Vincent's ghost, listening. I didn't believe in ghosts, but if they existed, I hoped he understood. I hoped somewhere in whatever comes after death, he could see that his choices had led to his end, not mine. I left the cemetery and picked up Timothy from practice. He was sweaty and happy, chattering about a goal he'd almost made. I listened to him and thought about how close we'd come to losing this, these ordinary moments of childhood, these simple joys. Jenny had almost destroyed it with her terrible choices. But I'd saved it. I'd done what I had to do. That evening, we had dinner as a family, Robert, Timothy, and me. I'd made pot roast, Robert's favorite, and we ate around the kitchen table, passing dishes and telling stories about our days. It was mundane. It was beautiful. It was everything I'd fought to protect. After dinner, I tucked Timothy into bed. He was getting too old for tucking in, but he still let me do it, still wanted that ritual of safety before sleep. I sat on the edge of his bed and brushed his hair back from his forehead. Love you, Grandma, he murmured, already half asleep. Love you too, baby. Sweet dreams. I turned off his light and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him sleep. This child who'd been locked in darkness and had found his way back to light. This child who'd been betrayed and had learned to trust again. This child who was my second chance at motherhood, my opportunity to do it right this time. I thought about everything I'd done to get to this moment, the surveillance, the manipulation, the blood on my hands that no one else could see. I thought about Marcus Delgado's words, I want you to remember that I could have killed you. I did remember. I'd never forget. But I also remembered breaking open that basement door. I remembered Timothy's filthy, terrified face. I remembered making the choice to fight back instead of cowering. And I realized something. I wasn't the same Barbara Whitmore who'd driven to Vancouver 14 months ago, worried about paint colors and dinner menus. That woman was gone, transformed by necessity into someone harder, someone capable of terrible things in the name of love. I wasn't sure if that transformation was good or bad. But I knew it was permanent. I went downstairs and found Robert in the living room, watching the news. I sat next to him on the couch, and he put his arm around me, pulling me close. You okay? He asked, because he always knew when something was bothering me. Yeah, I said. Just thinking. About how much I love you. About how grateful I am we survived everything this year threw at us. About how lucky we are to have Timothy. Robert, if I ever had to do something terrible to protect our family, would you forgive me? He was quiet for a long moment, and I wondered if I'd said too much, if he'd put together pieces I didn't want him to see. But finally he said, Barb, There's nothing you could do that I wouldn't forgive. Nothing. We've been through too much together. We've built too much. Whatever you've done or might do, I'm on your side. Always. I closed my eyes and let his words wash over me. He didn't know what I'd done, but he trusted me anyway. He loved me anyway. That was what family meant. Not perfection, but loyalty. Not always being right, but always being there. We sat together in comfortable silence, watching the news drone on about politics and crime and the endless troubles of the world. And I thought about how small my part in all of it was. One grandmother, one revenge, one death that wouldn't change anything in the grand scheme of things. Vincent Russo was dead, but there were 100 other Vincent Russos out there. Marcus Delgado was free, but there were 100 other Marcus Delgados. The drug trade would continue, families would continue to be destroyed, desperate people would continue making terrible choices. But I'd saved one boy. I'd protected one family. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all any of us could do, fight for the small circle of people we loved, protect them with everything we had, and hope it made a difference. Outside, the rain started to fall. Typical Portland, grey and steady and endless. I listened to it drumming on the roof and thought about all the storms we'd weathered, all the darkness we'd survived. And then I got up, checked on Timothy one more time, and went to bed next to my husband, grateful for another day of ordinary life reclaimed from the edge of disaster. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, through every painful twist and impossible choice, thank you. Thank you for listening to an old woman's confession, for not judging me too harshly, for understanding that love sometimes requires us to become people we never thought we'd be. I don't know if I did the right thing. I'll probably never know. But I did what I thought was necessary, and I'd do it again if I had to. Because that's what you do for family. That's what you do when the people you love are threatened and no one else will protect them. You become their protector. Their avenger. Their monster, if necessary. I returned from my husband's bedside and found my grandson locked in our basement, and I made sure the person responsible got exactly what she deserved. Not Jenny, who was as much a victim as a perpetrator, but the system that trapped her, the men who threatened us, the violence that nearly destroyed us. I made sure they understood that this family, my family, was not to be touched. And we survived. That's what matters in the end. We survived. Make sure you check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories of ordinary people pushed to extraordinary lengths, of families fighting back against impossible odds, of revenge that tastes both bitter and sweet. Because these stories matter. They remind us that we're stronger than we think, braver than we know, and that love, fierce, protective, uncompromising love, can overcome almost anything. Thank you for watching from wherever you are. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, family is everything. Protect it. Fight for it. Do whatever you have to do to keep it safe. Because in the end, that's all any of us really have.